The Peter Schiff Show.
Today's podcast is sponsored by Shopify. Shopify is a platform designed for anyone to sell anywhere, giving entrepreneurs like myself the resources once reserved for just big business. Sign up for a $1 per month trial at shopify.com/gold, all lowercase. Today's podcast is also sponsored by NetSuite, the easy-to-use cloud-based business management software for every aspect of your business. By popular demand, NetSuite has extended its one-of-a-kind flexible finance program for a few more weeks. Head to netsuite.com/gold. Good evening. I am back with another live Sunday night podcast. I am back in Connecticut, and we've had a very busy week politically, and that's pretty much what I'm going to base this podcast on. I'm going to be talking politics and, of course, some economics because the two are intertwined. In addition to the Republican National Convention, which took place over the course of this past week, we also got some big news a few hours ago today. Finally, Joe Biden officially dropped out of the race. Now, the pressure has been building on the president all week from members of his own party, from the big donors who wanted Biden to withdraw from the race. They don't want him to step down. I mean, they're fine with him finishing out his term. They're not calling on his resignation. They just don't want him to run for re-election. But apparently, he's not mentally competent enough to run for president, but he is mentally competent enough to be president, which of course makes no sense unless you look at it from a different prism, which is that the Democratic establishment, and including the big donors, they don't care that Biden is incompetent, whether he's senile, has dementia, some form of Parkinson's. They don't care about that because they've known about that, right? That's been a secret, which they weren't really able to keep, but they tried their best. And they were fine with Biden being reelected. The problem was the secret was exposed. And once the public saw the truth during the debates, well, they could no longer pretend that the Republican claims that, Biden was having these mental difficulties. They said, oh, that's fake news. They're just doctoring up the photos with AI, and they're taking stuff out of context. But they couldn't, push that lie anymore after it was all laid bare during the debate. I mean, maybe the Democrats thought that they could get Biden through that debate. Right? He had an entire week to rest up and prepare over at Camp David. I'm sure he had all the questions in advance. And he was highly prepared. And I guess they hoped that he could fool the public for 90 minutes, just enough to get people to believe that he was competent. Then they could put him back in hiding until the next debate. But he wasn't able to pull it off. I mean, he's so far gone that their best efforts to get him through those 90 minutes failed. And when he collapsed in the polls, when it became obvious that Biden wasn't going to win another term, that's the only reason they want him out. Not because he's not competent, but because he's going to lose. That's why they want to get rid of him. But the problem is they're replacing him with somebody else who's also going to lose, Kamala Harris. I mean, it's like, you're rearranging the deck chairs on a Titanic of an administration. It's a disaster. The ship's going down. It doesn't matter what they do. And in fact, I think that the reason that Kamala Harris isn't even lower in the polls is because she hasn't had a debate Trump yet. And the minute she does, I think she's going to tank even further. Because Donald Trump now, it's not like he's just a presidential candidate or a former president. He's a living American folk hero. I mean, it's ironic what happened with the assassination attempt. Although not surprising, but crooks clearly and that's the guy that shot him. Clearly, the most logical motivation was that he didn't want Trump to be president. Why? Well, because Donald Trump was another Adolf Hitler. He was going to end democracy. And so he probably thought he'd be a hero. He'd be the one to take him out, right? I mean, you're a hero if you assassinate Adolf Hitler. So his goal was to make sure that Trump wasn't elected. And, with all the vitriol, all this rhetoric of comparing Trump to Hitler, it's kind of surprising that it took so long for somebody to try to kill him. And in fact, I think what probably happened is that after the debates, it was obvious that Trump was going to win. I think before the debates, there was still a lot of optimism that he was going to lose. So there was no reason to kill him if he was going to lose. But once it became clear that he was going to win, that may have been the trigger for a guy like Crooks. And if it wasn't Crooks, maybe it had been somebody else that would have tried to be the hero to kill him. But because he missed, it actually backfired. In fact, he didn't miss. He hit him. It probably would have been better for him if he had missed him completely, because by wounding Trump, by hitting him in the ear, by drawing blood, right? I think he's elevated Trump's stature even more. Even Zuckerberg, I saw an interview where even he had to acknowledge, and he's not a Trump supporter. He was a Biden guy, right? He's a Democrat. But even he was impressed by the courage that Trump showed. I pointed out on the podcast last week the iconic photograph of the president lifting his fist in the air, blood on his ear, blood on his face, an American flag waving in the background. And he looked like, almost the image of the Marines in Iwo Jima, because the way all the Secret Service agents were crowded around him. It reminded me of that photograph. And I didn't realize at the time that he was saying fight, 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 which makes it even better because he's urging people to keep up the fight, to fight for freedom, to fight for the country, to fight for what we believe in. In fact, it was such an iconic photograph that did so much to elevate Trump. Again, not just to make him a folk hero, but almost a religious figure. You have a lot of people who think that this was an act of God, that it wasn't just luck, random chance that Donald Trump happened to turn his head at the moment that he did. It was divine intervention. God is on Trump's side. God wants Trump to win, right? Trump is doing the Lord's work. He's like the Messiah. He's a modern day Moses leading the country to the promised land. Now, I don't believe that. I think it was luck, good luck on the president's part. Look, I don't think that it was God that saved Trump any more than it was God that caused the other individual, I forget his name, to die. I mean, he just had bad luck. I mean, he was also trying to save his family, his wife and children, and he took the bullet in the head. But God didn't want that guy dead any more than he wanted Trump alive. You're just looking at the luck. But a lot of people don't think it was luck. They think it was God. Trump's a man of God. I mean, so this is making him a figure that is going to be nearly impossible to beat. Doesn't matter if it's Kamala Harris or whoever else the Democrats want to stick up on the ticket. Nobody is going to beat Trump. Not now. I mean, he was a strong candidate before the failed assassination attempt, but this has elevated it to a whole new level. And in fact, this attempt has done so much for Trump. And of course, Trump was courageous. I'm not going to take that away from the guy. I mean, a lot of people wouldn't have acted like that, but there are people that think that it was a setup, that it must have been staged because it's too good. That Trump he did it all for a photo op. When Trump raised his fist in the air, I don't even think he was thinking about photographers. He was thinking about the crowd because the crowd wasn't sure if he was alive or dead. They heard the shots. They knew the president went down. How do they know if he's alive? So he's signaling to his supporters who came to this rally. He's telling them, "Hey, I'm alive. He missed me, or I'm here. Keep up the fight. Keep fighting." And so that type of bravery, that type of imagery, that type of a man that would do that, that's the kind of guy that you want to be president. And as I said, even Mark Zuckerberg has to admit that as an American, he felt proud of what Trump did. He's a real leader. And, as I thought, this dominated the convention, especially, when Trump has the patch on his ear the whole time to remind everybody that he was wounded, and that he stood up in the face of this adversary. But the Democrats think it was so. It ended up being such a positive that it must have been a fake. And there's a lot of this. If you go on social media, there are a lot of prominent journalists or other people on social media who are claiming that this wasn't real, that this is theater, that the president wasn't even shot, that wasn't even real blood or his blood, that the Secret Service smeared it on him when they jumped on top of him, that the thing was staged. I saw one guy interviewed, because the guy was, kind of like a joke, interviewing people about, whether they thought it was real. And he asked this guy who thought it was a hoax, well, what about the guy that died? Or what about the assassin, right? That, they killed him. And his response was, well, Trump doesn't care about that. He has no regard for human life. He doesn't care if he has to kill a few people to get a good photograph. I mean, this is what people think about Donald Trump. And, it reminded me a lot of the Alex Jones, because Alex Jones got a lot of heat. And then, of course, he got sued and went broke from the defamation lawsuit, because people claim that he said that the Sandy Hook shooting was a hoax. Now, I think that what the people who are claiming that the assassination attempt was a hoax, what they're saying is way worse than anything that Alex Jones said. And, I had a kid in Newtown schools, not the very school that was shot, but one of the other elementary schools in the same school district. So, I was very close to this. But what Alex Jones was accused of doing really paled in comparison to what lots of people are, in fact, doing for real right now. They are making light of the fact that, one person is dead, two people are dead. I mean, if you include the assassin, would-be assassin. Two other people were injured. They're going to survive, but they did have bad injuries. And then a third, well, Trump got an injury, but who knows? But this is real violence. This is a real assassination. Where is the condemnation of all the people on social media and the journalists who are saying that this was theater, that this was faked, that none of this was real? This is, again, the hypocrisy of the left. They're allowed to do this, but Alex Jones is not. Now, again, of course, I don't really think Alex Jones, what he did was as bad as what they accused him of doing. But I think early on, he did have some questions about it. And again, you have to have the right to express an opinion, especially a controversial opinion, even if that opinion is wrong. I said from the beginning that the lawsuit against Alex Jones was wrong. And I would say the same thing if there was lawsuits against the people who are claiming that the assassination attempt was a hoax. But I'm consistent. The people who supported the lawsuits against Alex Jones are hypocrites if they don't also support or encourage lawsuits to be filed against these individuals. They need to be deplatformed too. Alex Jones was kicked off of Facebook and Instagram and Twitter until Elon Musk brought him back. But why was he deplatformed? Well, because he claimed that Newtown was a hoax. Well, what about all the people that are claiming the assassination attempt on the president was a hoax. Why aren't they being deplatformed? Again, I don't think they should be. I believe that people should be able to express whatever asinine opinions they want. Because if you get to a situation where the government can suppress an opinion that's wrong, well, then they can suppress any opinions they want. So you have to support free speech, or you have no speech, right? You have to support the right of people to say things that are offensive, that are stupid, that you disagree with. Because if you don't support that, then you're not going to have freedom of speech. But it's just amazing to me, again, or maybe not amazing, because I'm not surprised by the hypocrisy, because it's constant. I mean, that's the one thing that the left is consistent, as well as hypocritical. Anyway, we got a quick commercial break. We'll be right back. I got a lot more of this podcast, so stick around. Think of your favorite entrepreneur. They wouldn't be anywhere without trusted partners. If your commerce platform is scaring away potential customers instead of converting them into lifelong fans, you have to try Shopify. That's Shopify's new sales sound. Shopify is the commerce platform revolutionizing millions of businesses worldwide. From the launch your online shop stage to the first real life story stage, all the way to the did we just hit 1 million orders stage, Shopify's there to help you grow. Whether you're selling shipping supplies or promoting productivity programs, Shopify helps you sell everywhere. From their all-in-one e-commerce platform to their in-person POS system, wherever and whatever you're selling, Shopify's got you covered. Shopify helps you turn browsers into buyers with the internet's best converting checkout, up to 36% better compared to all other leading commerce platforms, and sell more with less thanks to Shopify's magic, your AI-powered all-star. Shopify powers 10% of all e-commerce in the U.S., and Shopify is the global force behind Allbirds, Rothy's, and Brookline, and millions of other entrepreneurs of every size across 175 countries. Plus, Shopify's award-winning help is there to support your success every step of the way, because businesses that grow with Shopify. But what I love most about Shopify is no matter how big you want your business to grow, Shopify gives you everything you need to take control and take your business to the next level. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/gold, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/gold now to grow your business no matter what stage you're in. Shopify.com/gold. The Democrats have got rid of one candidate who can't win, and they seem poised to replace him with another candidate who also can't win. You know, the Democrats going to the convention, they don't have to anoint Kamala Harris just because she's been endorsed by Biden. I think the main thing for Kamala Harris is she could use all the money that's been donated to the campaign so far, because if she's not on the ticket, then I guess they can't directly use all the donations that they've been collecting over the last few years. Now, she could be at the bottom of the ticket. She could stay on as VP, and they could bring on another person to be on the top of the ticket. But that seems very problematic. That she's the vice president, and it would be like a big slight or something if she stayed in the number 2 spot. But the delegates, in theory, can do what they want. There are a lot of people that we're talking about the fact that if Biden hadn't stepped down, that maybe the delegates could have taken it on their own to vote for somebody else. And a lot of people were saying, "Oh, you see, that's undemocratic." Well, yes, but that's what it's supposed to be. America is not supposed to be a democracy, right? All this stuff about how Trump is going to end democracy. I really wish we could end democracy and bring back the republic that the framers gave us, that we could not keep, that degraded into democracy. The Constitution was written to protect America from the evils of democracy. And one of the way that was done was the way we elected the president, with the Electoral College. The point of the Electoral College was not for the electors to be a rubber stamp. The idea was that the people would vote for a group of people who were supposedly smarter and better informed than they were. And this smaller group of smarter, more informed people, they would elect the president, so that the people didn't elect the president directly. They did it indirectly through their representatives. That's why we had conventions. That's why we sent delegates to a convention, so that they can, convene and decide on and elect a president. If they're simply going to rubber stamp the vote, then why even waste money at a convention? I mean, just count up the votes and just dispense with a convention. We know who the nominee is. The idea was that the delegates would come together, and you wouldn't know who was the chosen candidate until after the convention, right? That was the whole idea that the framers had. I mean, of course, it didn't hold up very long. It quickly kind of became a popularity contest, but that's not the idea. The idea was that this small group of people was supposed to be smarter and better informed than the public at large, which of course we know is not true. I mean, if you think that the Democratic delegates, that the people who go to the convention are smarter than the people who elected them, you haven't seen my video that I posted when I went to the DNC when Obama was running, and I still had my radio show. That's still one of my most popular videos on my YouTube channel. I got over 1 million views, right? When I went down to the floor of the Democratic convention and I asked the delegates if they would be in favor of the amendment that I wanted to incorporate into the platform, which was I wanted to ban corporate profits. And just about everybody I talked to thought it was a great idea. If you haven't seen this video, you got to watch it, right? It's on my YouTube channel. But watch that and then think, do you think those people are actually smarter than the typical man on the street? They might actually be dumber. So that might not have been a good idea that the framers had. But the idea, again, was not to have democracy, right? The Senate wasn't elected. The senators were appointed. They were appointed by the state legislators. That's not democratic. So there was a lot of things that were undemocratic about the process of electing our leaders. I mean, the whole idea of a Supreme Court was not democratic. That they can declare laws unconstitutional. A president could veto a law. That wasn't democratic. All kinds of checks and balances. I mean, we're not just a direct democracy where we just vote up and down and 51% and that's it, right? And 51% can exploit and the other 49%, right? Democracy is mobocracy. It's a tyranny of the majority. Our country was created to protect the minority from the majority. So you could have had a convention where the delegates could have decided that Biden's not the guy. He's not competent, and let's go with somebody else. But that wasn't going to happen, although we'll never know because now Biden has stepped out. But they don't have to just go with Harris. They can go with somebody else. But again, I don't care who they go with. I don't think that the Democrats have a chance of winning. Especially if the election is a referendum on the last 4 years, right? I mean, Trump lying, exaggerating about how great everything was when he was president. But Biden is lying about how great everything is right now. In fact, even in his, resignation or his announcement that he's not going to run for re-election, he says, we've got the strongest economy in the world, which is not true. We don't even have a strong economy, but he's trying to convince the voters that we do. Well, they know that's a lie. They're living in this weak economy. Trump is claiming that the economy was strong 4 years ago. Okay, well, people may not exactly remember that. But most people know from experience that they were better off 4 years ago than they are today. That from their perspective, the economy was better. So which lie are they going to believe? Right? Trump's is much more believable than Biden's, especially now that he's been elevated to folk hero, prophet of God. You can't beat him. When I was watching his speech, and of course I didn't watch it live because I was still in Europe, so I was fast asleep when the convention was going on. So I would wake up and I'd watch it the morning when I woke up. And when I'm watching Donald Trump, and he starts off, he comes out with the patch on his ear, right? Which is just, I don't even know if he still actually needed it by then, probably. But even if he didn't, it was a good idea to have it there. It was just an excellent reminder of what just happened. So he's wearing it like a badge of honor on his ear. But when he shows up at the podium and after he thanks everybody, he then starts his speech, and he says, "Friends, delegates, fellow citizens." And I expected immediately after he said that for him to say, "Lend me your ear." And I think it would have been very funny had he done that. Maybe he didn't come up with the idea, but as soon as I heard him say that in my mind, I finished his sentence with "Lend me your ear." But anyway, to comment on what the president spoke about and just the convention itself, I thought the convention was one of the best, maybe the best that I can remember for a Republican nominee. I think they made a very strong case, and I think a very credible case to a lot of undecided voters who may have been watching that convention that they should go for Trump. That he's a real leader. He's not a feeble old man, or now Biden stepping down. I mean, an incompetent, inexperienced woman. I don't care that Harris was vice president for 4 years. What the hell did she do? I mean, the one thing she was supposedly doing was securing the border, and she was an abject failure at that. So I don't think she has any real experience, and she doesn't have any real leadership qualities. But people know that the economy is bad. They're not believing the lies. They're being spoon-fed by the media, by Biden, that the economy is great and Joe Biden deserves the credit. They know the economy is lousy and Biden gets the blame, and so does Harris, because she's tarnished with the same brush. I mean, she's part of the administration, and so a vote for Harris is a vote for a continuation of this lousy economy that nobody wants to continue. People want change. They want things to be better. They don't want 4 more years. They can't handle 4 more years. So they need improvement. They need change, and Trump is the agent that can deliver it. So I thought it was a great convention for the Republicans, made so much better by the failed assassination attempt that elevates Trump to a higher status, lets everybody rally around the president. Even his critics now are kind of forced to support Trump. And the main narrative that they had, right, the reason that the Democrats said we can't elect Trump was because the country is all over because he's Hitler, right? He's the next Adolf Hitler. It's the end of democracy. And they can't say that anymore because of what happened. Because there was an attempt on the president's life. And of course, then all these people who were talking about how Trump was another Adolf Hitler, all of a sudden were, oh my God, we're so glad that he's safe. We're wishing the president well. We wish him a speedy recovery. You don't say that about Adolf Hitler, right? If Adolf Hitler gets shot at, you're not upset that the guy didn't kill him, right? It's like the Wizard of Oz. Ding dong, the witch is dead. You're going to celebrate if Adolf Hitler is killed. So they didn't celebrate. They were sympathetic. They said we condemn this violence. They're rallying around Trump because he's not Hitler, and they know he's not Hitler. Because if they really thought he was Hitler, they wouldn't be wishing him a speedy recovery. They would hope he died of something else, right? Nobody wants Adolf Hitler to live a long life. Right? They want to get rid of Adolf Hitler. But now, though, the Democrats can't say that anymore. They would look ridiculous if they did that. So you've basically taken away, or they've lost their main selling point, because they really couldn't sell Biden. Because as much as they want people to believe we have a strong economy, the voters know the economy sucks. So the only way to beat, or the only way for Biden to win, was to vilify Trump. Well, they succeeded so much in vilifying Trump that somebody tried to kill him. And so now they can't do that anymore. And so they've lost their only strategy, their only weapon, because they can't run on their record because their record sucks. And Donald Trump can point to how things were when he was president, and they're not nearly as good as he claims, but they're not as bad as it is now. And so that's what's really going to give him the advantage. Anyway, we got one more commercial, and then I'm going to come back and I'm going to talk a little bit more about the problems that I see coming in Trump's second term. We're driven by the search for better. But when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messages so you can contact with candidates faster. And Indeed doesn't just help you hire faster. 93% of employers agreed. Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites, according to a recent Indeed survey. Leveraging over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day, Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences. So the more you use Indeed, the better it gets. Join the 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. What I love most about Indeed is how simple it makes the hiring process and allows you to do all your hiring in one place. Candidates you invite to apply are 3 times more likely to actually apply for your job than the candidates who see it in search alone, according to U.S. Indeed data. Indeed gets you one step closer to the hire by immediately matching you with quality candidates. And now listeners of my show can get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/Peter. Just go to Indeed.com/Peter right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. That's Indeed.com/Peter. Terms and conditions apply. If you need to hire, then you need Indeed. Well, the old adage, be careful what you wish for, comes to mind when I think about this upcoming election, because the Republicans are probably going to win, highly likely. Not only will they win the White House, I think they will win back the U.S. Senate, and they will hold on to the House. So I do expect Trump once again to enjoy Republican Congress. The Republicans should be in control of the House and the Senate during the first 2 years of Trump's second administration. Now, whether they're able to hold on to that in the midterms will be a different story. But I think he'll have a long enough coattail to bring in some other Republicans with him. The problem, though, is going to be once they win, because Donald Trump is making a lot of promises that can't be kept. And he's setting the bar much too high. Now, of course, this is the optimism, right? He wants to get elected on an optimistic campaign of hope and, and prosperity and American greatness and all that. And people want to vote for positive, right? They don't like to vote for a candidate who's negative or pessimistic. What he's saying is something that's far more likely to get him elected than the truth. I mean, he's being truthful in that he's saying that the economy is really bad. It's actually worse than he realizes, or that he's letting on, because of the phony nature of the bubble. But where Trump is wrong is in his promise of a quick fix. He basically told the nation that if he's elected, inflation is going to go away immediately. All you have to do is elect Trump, and the Biden inflation is going to disappear. No more inflation. The economy is going to boom. Real wages are going to rise. It's going to be returned to, unparalleled prosperity, right? We're going to go from the worst economy ever to the greatest economy ever. And all we need to do to get there is vote for Trump. and he just has to assume office. And just based on, the power of his presence, right? With whatever he's going to do, it's going to instantly transform the economy. Now, maybe people think that, yeah, well, Trump could work miracles because, he's like Moses and has got a staff because God just saved him from that bullet. I don't know. But a lot of bad things have got to happen, and they may happen on Trump's watch. I mean, I could be optimistic about America's best days being in front of us. But if that's going to be true, there's a lot of bad days that are going to be between now and then that are also in front of us. The other saying that comes to mind is no pain, no gain. We have a lot of problems that need to be fixed, and fixing them means pain, means things get worse before they get better. But Trump is not promising that or acknowledging that. He's saying they're just going to get better immediately. And so when he's elected, it's going to be very difficult for him to ask Americans to swallow the bitter tasting medicine that he promised they were never going to taste, that everything was going to be great once he got elected, that inflation was going to go away. It's going to get worse. Inflation is going to be worse in Trump's term than it was in Biden's. Now, it's not necessarily because of what Trump is doing. That's just what was going to happen anyway. Now, had Donald Trump won a second term, or maybe he did win, but he just didn't get the votes officially. But had he served another term, inflation would have reared its head the same, because the inflation chickens were already out there. They just came home to roost on Biden. But some of those chickens had Trump's name on them, right? Trump was part of it. And so inflation problem is going to get much, much worse in the years ahead. Doesn't matter who's going to win. And, if you look at what was talked about, they didn't talk about the debt very often. It was barely mentioned. In fact, of all the conventions that I can recall, the debt was talked about the least. And one of the reasons that Trump couldn't talk about the debt is because he helped run it up, right? So he really can't make the debt an issue when he's part of that problem. But the debt has never been a bigger problem than it is right now, and it's never been discussed as little as it just was. And I'm sure it's not going to be discussed very much at all at the Democratic National Convention that's going to come up in a couple of weeks. And so at the point in time where the debt has never been a bigger problem or more dangerous is when there's the least amount of discussion. And that's not an accident, because nobody wants to discuss it because the problem is so bad. And there is no pain-free solution that the voters can be promised. So everybody just ignore it. Forget about it. Doesn't even matter. Right? There is nothing in this convention about the fact that the country is suffering from decades of excess government spending and excess government regulation. And as a result of that, the economy is a mess. And it's going to take time to repair the damage. But in so doing, rates have to go up. Donald Trump is promising lower interest rates. In fact, he's promising the immediate end of inflation and lower interest rates. How is he going to deliver, what might appear to be mutually exclusive promises? Because if we're going to immediately slash interest rates, how is that going to happen? The Fed's going to have to print more money to do that. The Fed's going to have to increase quantitative easing. That's the only way they're going to get interest rates down. Well, that's going to push inflation up. Right? Trump is promising low interest rates and low inflation. How are we going to get that with all this debt? He's not talking about cutting any government spending. The only thing he talks about is changing where the money is spent. He's not talking about cuts to government spending. He's talking about tax cuts. In fact, one of the things he's talking about is, eliminating the tax on tips for waiters and waitresses, or I guess anybody who gets a tip. So that's going to cost revenue to the government. Now, personally, I agree. I don't think we should tax tips. I don't think tips are income. I think they're a gift. I think I mentioned that on a prior podcast. And when I give a waiter a tip, I don't get a deduction on my taxes. When I have an employee and I pay my employee wages, I get to deduct those wages from my taxes. But when I go to a restaurant and I give somebody a tip, I don't get to write that tip off. I don't deduct that. So the government, the waiter shouldn't have to pay taxes on it. If it's not a deductible expense to the payer, it shouldn't be taxable income to the payee. And again, of course, as I said, when if your job as a waiter, you're supposed to give people good service, whether they tip you or not. So I just think they're gifts, especially, in Vegas, the dealers, right? A lot of people, when you go to Vegas, and they don't even call it a tip, they call it a toke, right? Your token, the dealer. The dealer at a blackjack table isn't going to give you a better hand if you tip him, right? In fact, if he did that, he'd be fired, right? He can't cheat. He's going to deal the cards, and you're going to win or lose. So the tip doesn't give you any better service. The guy that doesn't tip gets the exact same service as the guy that does tip. And so why is the tip income? I mean, it's clearly not. I mean, under the constitutional definition of income. But if they do eliminate the tax on tips, that's just less revenue for the government. How are they going to make it up? I mean, the only tax increase that Trump is proposing are tariffs. And, tariffs are better than income taxes. But a tariff, in order to be really effective, needs to be across the board. You can't simply say, we're going to put the tariff on China, because that doesn't work. What that means is that, Americans will import stuff from other countries and not China if they can do it cheaper based on the tariff. But they're still going to end up paying a higher price than they would have paid had they been able to buy from China. But we're still getting the import, and the government's not getting any revenue because I'm buying a product made in India instead of made in China. What the government needs to do is just have an across-the-board tariff, 10%, 20% on all imports, no matter where they're coming from. That generates more revenue for the government, and that actually is better if your goal is to protect U.S. industry and maybe stimulate U.S. industry by getting more people to buy domestically. See, the problem is right now we've already destroyed most of our U.S. manufacturing. And so the tariffs don't help domestic industries. We still just import. We just pay higher prices for the imports. But I'd rather see the government collect taxes that way than through the income tax. I'd rather get rid of the income tax. Again, remember, the only reason we have an income tax is because the government told the public, we'll get rid of the tariffs if you allow us to tax the rich. Well, the people allowed the government to tax the rich, and as soon as they were able to tax the rich, they hammered the middle class and the poor with taxes that were much higher on their incomes than what they used to be when they were paying taxes on imports. So the country was much better off with tariffs and not an income tax back then, and we'd be a lot better off with tariffs and not an income tax in the future. The problem is we're going to get both. Trump's not going to get rid of the income tax. He just wants to have tariffs in addition to the income tax. But even if he simply makes small cuts to the income tax, it's still, a horrible tax. But the bottom line is spending is going to continue to grow. Nowhere. Nobody talked about entitlements. I didn't hear entitlements mentioned once as far as what are we going to do about the ticking time bomb with Social Security and Medicare and Obamacare. Nothing. None of this stuff was even discussed. Right? Why should they? Why should they bring up any of these issues? All they're going to do is lose votes, right? So you have all the people who are collecting Social Security, Medicare, thinking, yeah, I'm going to vote for Trump because, I don't have to worry. He's not going to cut my benefits. He's not talking about any problems with entitlements, any need to reform them, let alone actually cut them. There wasn't any programs that they talked about eliminating, any departments that they talked about eliminating. A lot of the Democrats wanted to pin this Heritage Foundation a 2025 plan, kind of hanging around Trump's neck because they claim it's some, ultra radical, far right, crazy doctrine because it's promising cuts. I mean, they want to eliminate the Department of Education, which would be a good thing. That was part of Ronald Reagan's platform. He wanted to get rid of the Department of Education. He wanted to get rid of the Department of Energy, which we didn't even have until Jimmy Carter. Donald Trump didn't talk about getting rid of any government departments. He did mention returning education to the states. Maybe that means getting rid of the Department of Education. I don't know. He didn't talk about it. But what I've heard them interview, they're talking about taking the money that they were giving to the Department of Education and just giving that money to the states, which instead of just cutting the spending, they just want to redirect it, which may be an improvement over what we have now. But we need to cut government spending, not just figure out a different way to spend the same money or to have other people spend the money. But there was no real talk. In fact, the only agency that I really heard Trump talk about was the Space Force, which he took credit for creating. We got to get rid of the Space Force. We couldn't afford the Space Force when Donald Trump proposed it, and we still can't afford it. We need to get rid of big chunks of the government. Yet there was no discussion at all during this 4-day convention about any government agencies or departments that we could get rid of, that we could abolish. So, yes, while they painted a picture of how bad things are now because of Biden, the idea was everything was great before Biden. Like we had this great economy that Trump had already succeeded in restoring America's greatness. And it was just taken away by Biden. And all we have to do is make the last few years disappear, and we're back to the greatest economy in the history of the country, which isn't the case. The economy is bad now, and it was bad when Trump was president because he inherited a problem that got worse on his watch because he didn't do anything about the underlying disease. And so we got sicker. And that is what I'm concerned about, because Trump wins and the Republicans are in charge. And what if it finally hits the fan? What if we get the dollar crisis, the sovereign debt crisis, runaway inflation? What if all of this happens early in the Trump term? Then what do we do? What does the nation do? Because now the left is going to say, you see, look what happened. Look at how we put Trump in there. We had this great economy under Biden, and now it's a complete disaster. Inflation's out of control, right? I mean, the whole economy has collapsed. The dollar has collapsed, all because of these ridiculous capitalistic, programs of the radical right, of the hard right. And, now we need Elizabeth Warren or AOC or Bernie Sanders or some type of democratic socialism. We got to get rid of the last vestiges of the evils of capitalism because look what they've done. That is the risk that we run here by promising so much more than we can deliver, by talking about these pain-free solutions. Now, maybe it's possible that if Trump wins, he can immediately level with the public about the severity of the problem and let them know what has to happen. Instead of just, continuing to pretend that everything is going to be great because he's the president and that he has the power to make all these problems go away just by drill, baby, drill, right? That was his whole solution to inflation, was drill more oil, which, sure, drill more oil, but that's not going to solve the problem that we have. The problems are much deeper than these oil wells. And yes, he promised an immediate end to the wars. I hope he can deliver on that promise. I do believe that had Trump been president, these wars probably wouldn't have started. But once they started, it's a little bit more difficult to quickly get rid of them. But hopefully, if we stop funding the Ukraine and let them know that the money is going to stop, well, then maybe the war will come to an end and he can broker some type of truce that could bring an end to it, which would be a good thing. But a lot of the other economic promises that he made are impossible to keep. And I know that during Trump's first term, there was a lot of optimism that ultimately faded because people thought Trump was going to come in and really cut government spending, balance the budget, because he ran on that. The first time he ran, he was going to shrink government. He was going to, pay down the debt, right? He's not going to do that anymore. He's just talking about growing the economy. If we just grow the economy fast enough, that'll take care of the debt. At this point, that's not even possible. The debt is too big. The debt is growing too much, and interest rates have to go up. One of the ironies of a lot of this is people think that Donald Trump winning is more inflationary than Biden because, he's going to stimulate the economy more with tax cuts. And so we're going to have more inflation. And for that reason, they bid up the dollar. People think the dollar is going to go up under Trump because now the Fed is going to have to raise rates more to fight the higher inflation that's going to come from the stronger growth or whatever they think that the Trump policies are going to result in. But the truth is, if we really are going to have more inflation, that's not bullish for the dollar. That's bearish for the dollar. More inflation by definition means dollars buy less. And if the dollar is going to lose more of its purchasing power, that's a reason to sell dollars, not to buy dollars. And the political pressure is going to continue to mount, regardless of the outcome of this election, on the Fed to ease monetary policy, to cut interest rates, to print more money, to relaunch QE, to prop up the economy. Because the unemployment rate is going to go up regardless of the outcome of this election. That doesn't mean that the nation, is better off sticking with Biden or sticking with Harris, because I think things will get even worse. The problem is the Republicans getting the blame. But, I've had these concerns for many election cycles because I keep thinking that it's going to blow up. And we get through another 4 years and it doesn't happen because we keep kicking the can down the road. Well, again, eventually we can't kick it anymore. Somebody is going to get stuck with it. And when it happens, the incumbent and the incumbent party, unfortunately, are going to get the lion's share of the blame for problems that have been built up over not only years, but decades. And both parties have had culpability as far as running up the debt. But it's going to be whoever happens to be at the helm of the ship when it hits the iceberg that is going to take the blame. Right now, Biden's getting the blame because it's a rough ride, but it's not nearly as rough as it's going to be. Anyway, that's it for today's podcast. We'll see how the markets respond to the Republican convention, to Biden stepping down. Gold's been volatile. I saw on Friday it got knocked down again. It went back below 2,400. It got almost to 2,480 during the week, new all-time record high, and then sold off quite a bit on Friday. Same thing with silver. They knocked silver back below 30. In fact, intraday, again, it traded below 29. Just, again, I think a great buying opportunity in the metals. The dollar also rallied a bit. Again, I think on the belief that a Trump presidency is bullish for the dollar because it's going to mean bigger deficits and more inflation and therefore a tighter Fed. I think it's going to mean an easier Fed and more inflation, which is bad for the dollar and which is good for gold. But I'll be talking about that during the week. Now that I'm back, maybe I'll be able to do more than one podcast a week. We'll see. I'm still kind of vacationing, but I will be back in Puerto Rico probably by August 10th. And when I get back to Puerto Rico, it is my intention to be doing a lot more of these podcasts. So bye for now.